she rolled herself in a carpet and changed the fate of 2 empires. Before we dive into this epic love story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, because these legendary romances will blow your mind. Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, risks everything. She sneaks into Julius Caesar's chambers, hidden in a carpet, to win his support and save her throne. Caesar, the Roman powerhouse, is stunned by her wit and beauty. Their secret love affair topples her enemies and births a son, Caesarion. But politics wins over passion. Caesar returns to Rome and is assassinated. Cleopatra is left behind to raise a son and defend a kingdom alone. The world of 48 BCE was marked by power struggles, political intrigue, and an unyielding march of empires. Egypt, once the heart of a grand civilization, stood at a crossroads. Cleopatra, a young queen, inherited a throne teetering on the edge of chaos. Her reign, shaped by her father's decline, was mired in the expectations of a dynasty that had once ruled the Nile with unimaginable power. Yet Cleopatra was not just a figurehead. She was a shrewd, intelligent, and ambitious ruler, capable of moving her people in ways that few men could. At the same time, across the Mediterranean, the Roman Empire was nearing the peak of its influence. Julius Caesar, a general whose name echoed across the empire like a thunderous storm, was in the midst of his conquests. He had risen from humble beginnings to become the ultimate symbol of Roman power. Yet, despite his military triumphs, Caesar was far from content. His personal life, filled with political alliances and constant battles for control, was a world of its own, ripe for change. When their paths first crossed, the contrast between them could not have been starker. Cleopatra, the seductive and charismatic queen of Egypt, was struggling to secure her throne against the forces of her brother, Ptolemy the Triturian. Caesar, meanwhile, was deep in the political quagmire of Roman civil wars. It was a time of division when loyalty to one's ruler was as fragile as a house of cards. Their meeting, seemingly casual at first, would forever change the course of their lives. Cleopatra, understanding the weight of her political situation, had carefully orchestrated her entrance into Caesar's camp. Hidden inside a rolled-up carpet, she was smuggled into his chambers. When Caesar unrolled the carpet, there she was, unmistakably regal, yet unassumingly vulnerable, her eyes holding a silent promise of intrigue. Their eyes met, and for the briefest of moments, all of Rome and Egypt fell away. Caesar was struck by the audacity of this young woman, not only in her political intelligence, but in her beauty. Cleopatra, on the other hand, saw in Caesar not just a man of extraordinary power, but a key to her survival and her kingdom's prosperity. She was more than a queen. She was a survivor, a strategist who knew the importance of alliances in a world where dynasties were as fragile as empires. Their first conversation, though filled with the language of diplomacy, was laden with undercurrents of something more. As they spoke of Egypt's plight and Rome's needs, the bond between them began to form not just on the surface, but at a deeper level. Cleopatra's intelligence captivated Caesar, and Caesar's experience and military prowess drew Cleopatra in. There was a spark, an undeniable connection between two of the most powerful individuals in the world. But in their first moments together, they were aware of the forces against them. Caesar's political enemies saw him as a threat to Rome's stability, while Cleopatra's enemies in Egypt were determined to dethrone her. The world was watching, and the stakes could not have been higher. Their love, though still in its infancy, was already a dangerous game of power, politics, and destiny. In the days that followed, their relationship blossomed slowly but surely. Their meetings were not grand, public affairs, but quiet moments shared in secret corners of Caesar's villa and Cleopatra's palace. The letters they exchanged were filled with veiled words, not of love in its traditional sense, but of mutual respect and understanding. In them, Caesar spoke of the wars he waged, and Cleopatra wrote of the struggle she faced as a woman in power. These letters were not just pieces of correspondence. They were lifelines, the only means through which their hearts could meet across the vast distances that separated them. Their meetings were rare, brief encounters filled with whispered promises and lingering glances. Yet each one seemed to stretch time itself. The world beyond them ceased to exist for those few moments, and all that mattered was their connection. Their stolen moments were not grand gestures or passionate declarations of love. They were quiet, intimate exchanges that allowed them to see each other as more than rulers, more than symbols of power. They saw each other as people, struggling in their own ways to survive and thrive in a world that seemed determined to tear them apart. But not everything was easy. Cleopatra knew that her love for Caesar could cost her the throne. If Rome turned against him, she would be left alone in a dangerous world. And Caesar, though captivated by Cleopatra's beauty and intellect, was constantly under the shadow of political foes and the looming threat of war. Their love, though powerful, was fragile, sustained not by the grand moments, but by the quiet ones in which they found solace in each other's company. A moment of uncertainty looms large. Cleopatra must decide whether to follow her heart and risk everything for Caesar, or to turn her back on the only man who can secure her throne. Caesar, too, faces a choice. Will he continue to embrace the dangerous allure of Cleopatra, or will the political storm in Rome pull him away from her? Their love story, still in its early stages, is fraught with tension and risk. Will they defy the odds and make their love survive, or will they be torn apart by the forces beyond their control? The journey of Cleopatra and Caesar is just beginning, and their fate remains uncertain. The world waits, breathless, to see what will unfold. As Cleopatra and Julius Caesar's relationship began to deepen, it quickly became clear that their love was more than just a personal connection. It was a political weapon, a symbol of power and potential. However, it was also a relationship under constant pressure, both from the outside world and from the complexities of their own hearts. The context of their love affair could not have been more tumultuous. The Mediterranean world was consumed by conflict. Rome was in the midst of a civil war, with Caesar engaged in a battle against Pompey, a political rival who had once been his ally. The fate of the Republic hung in the balance, and Caesar was determined to maintain his power at any cost. Meanwhile, Cleopatra, still only in her early 20s, was struggling to hold on to her throne in Egypt amidst the growing ambitions of her younger brother, Ptolemy III, who had been installed as a co-regent but was a puppet for the ruling court factions. Caesar's decision to stay in Egypt was seen as both a strategic move and an act of betrayal by some of his closest allies in Rome. For Cleopatra, his presence was both a lifeline and a dangerous gamble. She needed Caesar's military support to secure her position on the throne. But she was also aware that her relationship with him was becoming an increasingly dangerous political maneuver. As their love blossomed, so too did the tension between their empires. Cleopatra knew that Caesar's focus on her meant that he would be distracted from his war in Rome. The fragile peace she had achieved with her brother was about to unravel, and her enemies were closing in. The question that haunted her was whether she could maintain her kingdom and her power while keeping Caesar at her side, or if his growing attachment to her would ultimately be her undoing. Caesar, on the other hand, found himself caught between the desires of his heart and the demands of his position. His first love had always been Rome, and though Cleopatra had captivated him, the reality of his situation was far more complicated. He could not afford to stay in Egypt for long. The war in Rome demanded his attention, and every day he remained by Cleopatra's side was another day his enemies in Rome plotted against him. His growing attachment to her, however, made leaving Egypt nearly impossible. He found solace in Cleopatra's intelligence, her command of the Egyptian court, and her beauty. Yet he also knew that his actions were increasingly becoming a political statement, not just a personal choice. The couple's secret meetings became more than just stolen moments. They became a battleground of emotions and strategy. Their time together was filled with the quiet intensity of two leaders who knew the stakes of their love. Cleopatra was no longer just a young queen in search of a protector. She had become a shrewd political player, constantly maneuvering, always thinking several steps ahead. Caesar, too, found in Cleopatra someone who could challenge him in ways that no one else could. She was no mere pawn in his imperial game. She was an equal, a partner. But the whispers in the court grew louder. Cleopatra's enemies within Egypt began to conspire more openly, seeking to undermine her rule. Her brother, Ptolemy XIII, who had once been her co-regent, was growing more erratic and desperate. Supported by the powerful factions who resented Cleopatra's reign, he attempted to weaken her position. Cleopatra knew she could no longer rely solely on her charm and intellect to retain the throne. She needed Caesar's military strength. The tension reached its peak when Ptolemy's forces launched a direct assault on Cleopatra's palace. Caesar, upon hearing of the attack, quickly mobilized his troops to defend Cleopatra. The battle for Egypt had officially begun. For Cleopatra, this was a test of everything she had built: her rule, her empire, and her love. In those moments, as Caesar stood by her side, it was clear that their bond had transcended the political alliance it had once seemed to be. This was no longer just a strategic marriage of convenience. Their passion for each other was undeniable, and yet the world around them demanded sacrifices. As Caesar's legions defeated Ptolemy's forces, Cleopatra's reign was solidified, but at a cost. The tension between Rome and Egypt had never been greater. Caesar's presence in Egypt was seen as an open defiance of Roman tradition. He had placed his personal affairs above the needs of the Republic, and whispers began to circulate that he had become too entangled in the politics of Egypt. His enemies in Rome, led by Pompey's supporters, began to rally against him, pushing for his return to Rome. Yet, despite the political maelstrom, Cleopatra and Caesar's relationship grew stronger. They were no longer just lovers. They had become political partners. Cleopatra, once a queen with a fragile throne, was now a powerful figure in the ancient world, a queen whose love affair with Caesar was transforming the balance of power in the Mediterranean. However, their love was not without its costs. Cleopatra was forced to confront the reality that her bond with Caesar could not shield her from the political consequences of his actions. Caesar, too, was torn. His growing affection for Cleopatra made him question his own path. Would he stay with her, defy Rome, and risk his own power? Or would he return to the Republic, leaving Cleopatra behind? The weight of both decisions threatened to break them apart. The emotional stakes could not be higher. Caesar's allies were calling for his return to Rome, where his position was becoming increasingly unstable. Cleopatra's enemies in Egypt were circling, eager for her downfall. Could their love survive the mounting pressure from both sides? Would they be able to remain true to each other, or would the political forces at play tear them apart? The future of their love and of their empires now hung in the balance. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The fragile balance between love and power, between personal desire and political duty, was about to be tested in the most profound way. As the stakes rose, so did the intensity of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar's relationship, a bond now both an emotional and a political revolution. But the world around them was changing, and with it, the future of their love. Caesar's return to Rome was inevitable. The war in the Roman Republic had left its scars, and the pressure to restore stability within the empire had grown too great. The Senate and his political enemies were no longer merely whispering against him. They were now openly conspiring to bring about his downfall. His enemies in Rome demanded his presence, and while Cleopatra's charm and intelligence had won his heart, Caesar's loyalty to Rome could not be so easily swayed. He had risen to power not just through military conquest, but by a deep connection to the Roman people, a connection that no romantic relationship could override. Yet, as he prepared to leave Egypt, he was painfully aware of the cost. Cleopatra knew that Caesar's return to Rome would mean the end of their life together in Egypt. The love they had shared in the seclusion of her palace, the stolen moments in the quiet night, would be replaced by distance, duty, and the demands of their respective empires. She had fought for so long to hold on to her power in Egypt, and now, as she had finally secured it, she faced the most difficult decision of all: how to let go of the only man who had truly understood her. But Cleopatra was no stranger to loss. She had buried her father, her brother, and the countless members of her court who had betrayed her. She had survived plots, assassinations, and endless schemes to bring her down. But this was different. Caesar wasn't just another political ally or a fleeting lover. He was the love of her life, a man whose presence had given her the strength to reclaim her kingdom. And yet, even Cleopatra knew that the tides of history would not bend for them. She could not hold Caesar forever. As they said their final goodbyes at the docks of Alexandria, the weight of their parting was almost too much to bear. Cleopatra's eyes were filled with unshed tears, but she did not let them fall. She was the queen of Egypt, and she had to remain strong. Caesar, too, struggled with his own emotions. His love for her was clear in the way he held her gaze, in the lingering touch of his fingers on her arm. But he was a man bound by duty, and his heart, though torn, was also steadfast in its devotion to Rome. They were two forces, too powerful for their own good, pulled in opposite directions by the tides of fate. "Perhaps, one day, we will meet again," Caesar whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "But for now, the world is waiting for me." Cleopatra nodded, her lips trembling, but her resolve unbroken. "And for me, Rome is just a dream, Julius. But I will never forget our love." With that, Caesar boarded his ship, leaving Cleopatra standing alone on the docks, watching him sail away. The sounds of the world around her faded as she stood there, rooted to the spot, unable to move. For the first time in her life, Cleopatra felt the weight of an uncertainty that had nothing to do with politics or the fate of Egypt. It was a more personal, heart-wrenching uncertainty. Could she live without him? Caesar's return to Rome did not mark the end of his love for Cleopatra. Despite the distance between them, their bond was far from broken. Their connection would endure in the form of a son, Caesarion, born shortly after Caesar's departure. Cleopatra, despite the crushing sadness of parting from the man she had loved with all her heart, found hope in the life they had created together. Her son was a living testament to their love, a bond between the most powerful empires of the time. But Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE shattered everything. His murder rocked Rome to its core, and Cleopatra's world, which had seemed so solid just months earlier, was thrown into disarray once more. Caesar's death left a gaping hole in her life, but it also opened a new chapter of struggle. She had to navigate the chaotic political waters of Rome while protecting her son and Egypt's sovereignty. When news of Caesar's death reached her, Cleopatra was devastated. It was not just the loss of a lover, but the loss of a future she had imagined with him, a future in which Egypt and Rome would be united under their son's reign. She had thought that Caesar's legacy would live on through their child, but with his death, those dreams seemed to fade. Yet Cleopatra was not a woman easily defeated. Her resolve to protect Caesarion and her kingdom remained steadfast. She would honor Caesar's legacy by ensuring his son's future, even if that meant aligning with other powers, including his former rival, Mark Antony. Cleopatra's love for Caesar was a love that would never die. She wore his memory like a cloak, and in the years that followed, she used it to navigate the stormy seas of Roman politics. Her relationship with Caesar transcended the political and the personal. It became a symbol of defiance against the powers that sought to keep her down. As the years passed, Cleopatra's love for Caesar continued to define her. Though she would go on to have relationships with other powerful men, none would ever hold the same place in her heart as Caesar had. She had loved him not for his power, but for his brilliance, his vision, and his unwavering belief in her strength. And in turn, Caesar had loved her not just for her beauty, but for her intellect, her resilience, and the fire that burned in her soul. Together, they had shared a bond unlike any other in history, one that was both a personal and political revolution. When Cleopatra died in 30 BCE, her death marked the end of an era. She had outlived Caesar by more than a decade, but her love for him never wavered. She had fought for her kingdom, for her son, and for the memory of the man who had once stood at her side. The love affair between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar became more than just a story of two rulers. It became the tale of an undying love that shaped the course of history. In the end, their love was not just an act of passion, it was a rebellion against the forces that sought to separate them. It was a symbol of the power of love to transcend time and space, to bridge the gap between empires, and to change the world. Cleopatra and Caesar, though separated by death, remain forever intertwined in history. Their legacy is immortalized in the figure of Caesarion, the son who carried with him the blood of both Egypt and Rome. It is also carried in the countless stories that have been told about their forbidden love, stories that continue to inspire and captivate us today. The love between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar teaches us that love is not always easy, nor is it always rewarded in the way we expect. It can be fraught with challenges, with sacrifice, and with pain. But in the end, it is love that endures. Through the ages, through the stories we tell, and through the lives we touch. What does that tell us about the nature of love? That perhaps even in a world where power is everything, it is the quiet, intimate moments shared between two people that have the power to change the world forever. The year was 1115, a time when the world of learning was as much a battleground as any field of war. Europe was in the midst of the High Middle Ages, a period of both intellectual blossoming and intense religious control. Monasteries and cathedral schools were the centers of knowledge, and scholars gathered in cloisters to debate theology, philosophy, and the nature of God. In this world of learned men, a young woman named Eloise stood apart from the conventional expectations of her gender. Heloise was not a nun, nor was she the daughter of any noble house. She was a niece, raised in the household of a well-respected canon, Fulbert, who had taken her in as his ward after the death of her parents. Despite being a woman, in an era where education was a privilege largely reserved for men, Eloise's brilliance and intellectual curiosity set her apart. She had been tutored by the best minds of Paris, and her mind was as sharp as any scholar of the day. Yet, like most women of her time, her talents were often overlooked in favor of a marriage that would secure her future. But fate had something else in store for Heloise. It was in the great intellectual city of Paris, at the renowned Notre Dame Cathedral School, that she would encounter Pierre Abelard, a man whose intellect and passion would change the course of her life forever. Abelard was not just any scholar. He was one of the most celebrated philosophers and theologians of his time, a man whose wit and brilliance had already earned him a place in the annals of academic history. He had come to teach at the school, and soon his lectures would draw students from across the land eager to hear his ideas on logic, reason, and faith. Their first meeting was unremarkable, and yet it would become one of the most fateful encounters in history. Eloise, as the niece of Fulbert, was attending one of Abelard's lectures. She was, as always, attentive and quick to grasp the subtleties of his teachings. But Abelard, captivated by her intellect, began to notice her more and more. What started as an admiration for her mind soon blossomed into something much more profound, something neither of them had anticipated. At first, their relationship was simply one of teacher and student, but it soon became clear that the bond they shared transcended the intellectual. Heloise, brilliant and independent, was drawn to Abelard's charisma and intellectual prowess. Abelard, for his part, found himself increasingly fascinated not just by her intellect, but by the fiery spirit that seemed to burn within her. She was not content to sit quietly in the back of the classroom. She challenged him, tested him, and held her own against him in their discussions. For Abelard, this was not merely an academic exchange. It was the start of a powerful, emotional connection. As they spent more time together, their relationship evolved beyond the bounds of teacher and pupil. Secret meetings followed, as Abelard and Heloise found themselves drawn to each other by an undeniable force. Their intellectual bond had transformed into something more intimate, more dangerous, for in the world they inhabited, such a relationship was forbidden. The church condemned any sexual relationships outside of marriage, and the stakes for Eloise were even higher. Her uncle, Fulbert, had long harbored hopes that she would marry into a respectable family. Any hint of an illicit relationship could destroy her reputation and, ultimately, her future. And yet, despite the risks, their love grew. They began to exchange secret letters, each one more personal and passionate than the last. Abelard's letters, full of love and longing, were filled with references to their intellectual debates and the moments of tenderness they shared. Heloise's replies were equally revealing, as she confessed the depths of her affection for him and the conflict she felt between her love for him and the fear of scandal. As their love deepened, so did the consequences of their actions. Their secret meetings became more frequent, and their physical relationship began. It was not just passion, but an intellectual union that bound them together, two minds and two hearts intertwined, seeking not just physical pleasure, but a profound connection that transcended the mundane. In their letters, they spoke of their love with a tenderness that belied the danger they were in. Abelard wrote of his longing for Heloise, not just as a lover, but as a partner in thought, a companion in life. Heloise, in turn, expressed her desire to be with him, not just in the fleeting moments they shared, but in a permanent bond. But their love was not to remain a secret for long. The romantic and intellectual bond between Abelard and Heloise deepens. However, their illicit affair is soon uncovered, and the dangers of their love become increasingly apparent. How will they handle the growing pressure from society, from the church, and from Heloise's uncle? Can their love survive the inevitable consequences of their forbidden passion? Will their relationship survive the devastating challenges about to unfold? The love between Abelard and Heloise had flourished in secret, a tender yet fiery connection nurtured in the shadows of academia and mutual respect. But the world, as it often does, soon intruded upon their private paradise, and with it came the bitter consequences of their forbidden love. Their secret meetings, once filled with intellectual exchange and passionate affection, had become the subject of suspicion. Eloise's uncle, Fulbert, had begun to hear whispers. As a respected canon, he had been pleased to see his niece's intellectual progress under Abelard's tutelage. He had trusted the famous philosopher with her education, but trust can be a fragile thing, and the lines between affection and scandal had blurred dangerously in his eyes. Fulbert's anger grew when he began to suspect that their relationship was more than just academic. The eventual confrontation came as a shock to both Abelard and Heloise. Fulbert, deeply ashamed by the rumors surrounding his niece, confronted Abelard in a fit of rage. He demanded an explanation, a denial, or an admission, desperate to preserve the honor of his family and the reputation of his niece. The scandal had already spread beyond their immediate circle, and Fulbert's fury was all-consuming. Abelard, though deeply in love with Heloise, was also bound by his duties to the church and his academic position. He could not afford to lose his reputation, for it would mean the end of his career and the destruction of the very intellectual pursuits he held dear. At first, he tried to deflect the accusations, but when Fulbert's wrath became too great to ignore, a solution was proposed, one that would forever alter the course of their lives. In the wake of their affair being exposed, Abelard and Heloise were forced to make a devastating choice. To preserve Heloise's honor and Abelard's career, they decided to take a drastic step. Heloise, who had never imagined that her intellectual life would be overshadowed by anything as pedestrian as love, was faced with the humiliation of a decision she could never undo. She was sent away to the convent of Argenteuil. There, she would seek refuge in the religious life, isolating herself from the world that had once been hers. For Abelard, the decision was equally painful. To maintain his position and reputation, he was forced to take the vow of celibacy. Thus, severing the bond of love that had once been so consuming, he sought refuge in the monastic life, dedicating himself to writing and philosophy. But the pain of losing Heloise was far from a distant memory. His intellectual pursuits, while a source of fulfillment, could not drown out the ache in his heart. The world that had once seemed full of promise now felt empty without her. But Heloise, far from retreating into the quiet, holy life that the convent offered, found herself confronting a profound internal conflict. She had once been the brilliant scholar who walked the halls of the great cathedral schools of Paris, surrounded by intellectuals who had recognized her worth. But now, in the quiet of the convent, surrounded by the austere vows of silence and prayer, she felt the weight of loss pressing on her chest. She was not merely mourning the loss of Abelard. She was mourning the loss of a future that had been taken from her, her role as a thinker, a teacher, and a woman who had once believed in the possibility of intellectual freedom. Despite the separation, their connection was not severed. Heloise and Abelard continued to exchange letters, each one filled with longing, regret, and the shared pain of their parting. These letters became the only lifeline between them, a way to keep their bond alive despite the distances, both physical and spiritual, that now separated them. The letters were filled with philosophical musings, reflections on faith, and, above all, an expression of the deep, abiding love they had for one another. They did not dwell on the bitterness of their separation, but on the love that still remained, even if it could never again be fulfilled. Heloise's letters were a mix of intellectual clarity and raw emotion. She expressed her sorrow over the loss of Abelard, but she also questioned the very nature of their sacrifice. Did love have to be so painful? Did it have to be so entwined with the chains of society and the expectations of others? She wrote about the contradictions of her life, how, even in the convent, she could not escape the mental anguish that had plagued her since their separation. In one of her most poignant letters, she wrote to Abelard, "I have given up all that I once was. My heart is no longer mine, and my mind, though it is free, is burdened by 1,000 thoughts of you. You have taken from me the very essence of my being. But what remains? is not sorrow alone. It is the knowledge that love, our love, was too great to be bound by this world. I am here in the silence of the convent, surrounded by prayers and rituals, but I am haunted by your absence. Perhaps this is my punishment, my penance, for daring to love a man like you. Abelard, in his own letters, responded with a similar blend of intellectual discourse and deep, painful longing. His words, too, revealed the anguish of his separation from Heloise, as well as his doubts about their past decisions. He questioned whether the sacrifices they had made were worth the love they had lost. His devotion to the church, to his intellectual pursuits, now seemed hollow in comparison to the love he had once shared with Heloise. He wrote, "I find myself, in the quiet of my cell, torn between the duties I have sworn to uphold and the love I can never forget. How foolish I was to think that I could sever my soul from you. I am lost without you, Heloise. The church speaks of purity and piety, but in my heart I am a man consumed by passion. I wonder, sometimes, if you too are as lost as I am, caught between faith and love." In their letters, Abelard and Heloise revealed the depth of their sorrow and the complexity of their feelings. They had been torn apart by the world, by the church, by duty, but they had never stopped loving one another. They were two souls trapped in the past, forever bound by the love they had shared. The emotional stakes have never been higher. Abelard and Heloise, separated by the church, by fate, and by their own choices, struggle to reconcile their love with their vows. They continue to exchange letters filled with deep emotions, questioning the very nature of love and sacrifice. Will their love endure despite the pain, or will the passage of time and the harsh demands of their lives extinguish what once burned so brightly? The future of their love now seems uncertain. Time passed slowly for both Abelard and Heloise. The world outside continued its relentless march forward, but their love story, torn apart by forces beyond their control, remained frozen in the pages of their letters, in the silence of their separate worlds. The intellectual connection they had once shared was still present, but it was no longer enough to fill the emptiness left by their physical separation. Yet, even as they continued on separate paths, neither of them could forget the love that had once bound them together so fiercely. For Abelard, the loss of Heloise was a torment that never fully left him. He had immersed himself in the work of writing and teaching, trying to find solace in the world of logic, philosophy, and theology. But even as he rose to greater prominence within the church and the academic world, a part of him always remained tethered to Heloise. His life, though filled with accomplishments, was marked by an undeniable sorrow, a grief that only she could understand, yet was now beyond his reach. In his later years, Abelard's intellectual journey led him to a deeper contemplation of the ideas he and Heloise had once discussed together. He found himself questioning not just the teachings of the church, but also the very nature of the vows he had taken. Was his sacrifice of love and intimacy truly a path to salvation, or was it a betrayal of the human heart? In the solitude of his cell, Abelard found little comfort in the life he had chosen. His intellectual legacy would endure, but the personal sacrifices he had made for the sake of love, those sacrifices that had cost him the one person who had truly understood him, remained unresolved. Heloise, on the other hand, had built a life for herself within the convent of Argenteuil. Yet the pain of her separation from Abelard never left her. She threw herself into the religious life, but she could not escape the gnawing sense of loss that haunted her every day. It was in the convent's quiet solitude that she reflected on the choices she had made and the love that she had lost. Though she found solace in prayer and devotion, the love she had once shared with Abelard was a constant presence in her thoughts. Over the years, Eloise had become abbess of Argenteuil, and though she led her convent with wisdom and grace, her heart remained tied to Abelard. Her letters to him, though fewer as time passed, still carried the same raw emotion as they had in their youth. In one of her final letters to him, Eloise confessed, "I have lived in the silence of the convent, surrounded by prayers and the rituals of the faith, but I cannot rid myself of the thoughts of you. I have given my body and soul to God, but you have claimed my heart forever. Even now, as I wear the habit of a nun and perform the sacred duties expected of me, my love for you is as strong as it was the day we parted. I wish I could have given you more than just my mind, but the heart that loved you so fiercely is now lost to time, and yet I cannot let go." For Abelard, Eloise's words were a bittersweet comfort. Despite the many years that had passed, he understood her pain all too well. His response, though filled with philosophical reflection, was a testament to the deep, abiding love he still felt for her. It was a love that transcended the physical, the intellectual, and the religious. It was a love that had shaped both of their lives in ways that no vows, no church, and no temporal authority could ever take away. "I, too, have known the weight of this love, Heloise," he wrote in one of his final letters. "Though I am bound by my vows, my mind has never been free of you. I have written and taught, and yet I am haunted by the absence of the one person who ever truly understood me. You are my greatest companion, and I can never escape the mark you have left on my soul. What is love, if not a force that binds us beyond reason? I have lived a life of the mind, but my heart remains with you, as yours does with me." But their love, despite the depth of their feelings for one another, was never meant to be fulfilled in the way they had once hoped. The Church, in its infinite capacity for judgment, had marked their love as a sin, a transgression that neither of them could escape. The consequences of their passionate relationship had shaped the rest of their lives, lives that were, in many ways, defined by sacrifice, duty, and the pursuit of redemption. Yet, in the quiet moments of reflection, both Abelard and Heloise found a measure of peace. They had loved as deeply as two people could love, and though the world had torn them apart, their connection endured. It was a love that defied the societal and religious constraints placed upon them, a love that lived on in their intellectual legacy and in the hearts of those who came to know their story. The final chapter of their love story is marked by their deaths, both of which were solitary and marked by the weight of years spent in religious devotion and intellectual work. Abelard, weakened by years of physical illness and the burdens of his monastic life, died in 1142. Heloise, by then abbess of Argenteuil, lived for several more years before passing away in 1164. But despite their physical separation, their love remained undying, preserved in their letters and in the legends that surrounded them. In a fitting, if tragic, end to their story, Abelard and Eloise were buried side by side at the Abbey of Père Lachaise in Paris, a final testament to the love that had once burned so brightly. Their graves became a symbol of eternal love, and their story, one of intellectual brilliance and forbidden passion, would continue to inspire generations to come. Abelard and Eloise's love story became more than just a tragic romance. It became a symbol of the human heart's resilience and the ways in which love can transcend time, space, and even the strictest societal boundaries. Their love was intellectual, spiritual, and passionate, an affair that challenged the rigid structures of their time and left an indelible mark on the history of Western thought. In the centuries that followed, their story would inspire countless poets, philosophers, and artists. Their letters, still preserved today, continue to be read and admired for their raw emotion and intellectual depth. Their love, though tragically cut short, became a testament to the power of human connection. How love, even when thwarted by the world around it, has the power to endure. The legacy of Abelard and Heloise teaches us that love is not bound by rules or conventions. It is a force that transcends time, place, and circumstance, often leaving us with more questions than answers, yet enriching our understanding of the human experience. Their love, immortalized in history, remains an inspiration, a reminder that sometimes the greatest passions of the heart are the ones most often overlooked by society. Their story is a beautiful and tragic reflection of what it means to love fully and completely, even in a world that demands sacrifice in return. In the 19th century, London was a city alive with innovation, culture, and intellectual movements. It was an era defined by social change, artistic flourishing, and a rising middle class eager to make its mark on the world. Yet, beneath the vibrant surface of this thriving metropolis, Elizabeth Barrett lived a life marked by physical pain, emotional isolation, and the protective embrace of her father, Edward Barrett Moulton Barrett. Elizabeth, born in 1806, was the eldest of 12 children, but despite her large family, she felt the cold distance of being an outsider. Her father, a wealthy landowner, was a stern and controlling figure who, in his strict belief in keeping his children under his roof, isolated Elizabeth from the outside world. She was a woman of great intellect and profound sensitivity, a poet whose works resonated with the sorrow, beauty, and complexity of life. Her poetry was filled with themes of suffering, spirituality, and a quiet, yearning hope. Yet, despite her literary success, Elizabeth lived in the shadows of her own life, physically fragile and emotionally burdened by the confines of her family's expectations. Meanwhile, across the English Channel in France, Robert Browning, a passionate and dynamic poet, was carving his own path through the literary world. Born in 1812, Robert was a man of ambition, a lover of poetry who had been influenced by the works of Shelley and Byron. Though younger than Elizabeth, he was already making a name for himself with his vivid, dramatic verse, filled with psychological insight and social commentary. His works were bold and unflinching, contrasting sharply with the more reserved, melancholic tone of Elizabeth's. Their paths would first cross through letters. Elizabeth had already earned a reputation for her writing, but it was not until 1845 that Robert, having read her sonnets from the Portuguese, felt compelled to write to her. In her sonnets, Elizabeth had poured out her heart, words that were intimate and raw, laden with longing, passion, and melancholy. Robert was deeply moved by the depth of emotion in her work. and he felt an immediate connection to the woman who had written these verses. His letter to Elizabeth was polite, sincere, and full of admiration for her poetic genius. Yet, what began as a professional correspondence would soon evolve into something more profound. Connection of two souls, separated by both distance and circumstance, but drawn together by the raw power of their words. Elizabeth, initially reluctant to correspond with a stranger, found herself intrigued by Robert's persistence and sincerity. As their letters began to flow back and forth, their intellectual connection deepened. Elizabeth's poetry, which had been born from the solitude of her own life, now found a kindred spirit in Robert's bold and impetuous words. Their correspondence quickly grew more personal, as they shared not only their views on poetry, but their feelings, fears, and desires. Robert was captivated not only by Elizabeth's writing, but by her spirit, which, despite her physical weakness, seemed to shine through her words. In their letters, Robert revealed his admiration for Elizabeth's poetry and her strength, while Elizabeth slowly began to trust him with her own heart. She confided in him about her overbearing father, her health struggles, and the sense of confinement she felt in her own life. Robert's letters became a lifeline for Elizabeth, offering a glimpse of the outside world, a world that seemed unreachable to her. One of the most poignant moments in their early correspondence came when Robert declared his love for Elizabeth. His letter, though respectful of her situation, was full of the passionate intensity that characterized his personality. He wrote, "I love you, and I am content to wait as long as you need. There is no other woman for me, and I wish to spend my life by your side." His declaration was simple, yet profound. It was a love born not just from attraction, but from a deep respect for her mind and spirit. Elizabeth, though deeply moved, was initially hesitant. She was, after all, bound by the constraints of her family and her own health. The idea of leaving her father's house, where she had lived for so long, was terrifying. But Robert's love for her, his unwavering belief in her worth, began to erode her doubts. She responded with her own confession, revealing the depth of her feelings for him. Her words were gentle, but full of yearning, as she wrote, "Your love gives me strength. You have opened my eyes to a life I never thought I could have." Their relationship, built on intellectual camaraderie and mutual respect, began to blossom into a deeper, more intimate connection. But their love, though pure and powerful, was not without its obstacles. Elizabeth's father, already fiercely protective of his daughter, would never accept their union. He had kept Elizabeth close, shielding her from the world, and the idea of her marrying a man who was not of their social class was unthinkable. Elizabeth's father, in his obstinate belief that no man could be worthy of his daughter's affection, forbade her from marrying. But the love between Elizabeth and Robert had grown beyond mere affection. It was now a bond that neither distance nor opposition could break. The stage is set for an impossible decision. Elizabeth's love for Robert has blossomed, but she is still trapped within the walls of her father's house, under the control of a man who would not allow her to choose her own destiny. Will Elizabeth and Robert's love survive the pressure of family opposition and social constraints? Or will their dreams of a future together remain forever unfulfilled? As Elizabeth and Robert's relationship deepened through their letters, their bond grew stronger, transcending the distance and barriers that separated them. But the walls around Elizabeth, erected by her father, her family, and her own fears, remained unyielding. The love they shared, though bright and undeniable, was hidden in the shadows of their respective lives. It was not merely an emotional connection that grew between them. It was a deep, abiding understanding that two souls had found a rare and extraordinary companionship. In the years of correspondence, Robert's persistence never waned. He wrote to Elizabeth constantly, each letter filled with hope and passion, encouraging her to see beyond the prison of her father's house. Elizabeth, fragile in both body and spirit, found in Robert's words not just intellectual stimulation, but the promise of a different life, one of freedom, love, and acceptance. Yet, as their relationship blossomed, Elizabeth was still bound to the constraints of her overbearing father, Edward Barrett Moulton Barrett. He had been the architect of her isolation and the keeper of her emotional world, and his domineering presence overshadowed her every move. Her father had decided that Elizabeth would never marry, as he believed that no man would ever be worthy of her, and that she, due to her frail health, was too fragile for the hardships of marriage. As a result, her emotional and physical needs had been ignored, and her life had been an endless cycle of loneliness, academic pursuits, and constant illness. Elizabeth, despite the love she had found in Robert's letters, was caught between her own yearning for independence and her sense of duty toward her father. The conflict within her heart raged as she struggled to balance the intense desire for a life with Robert against the crippling fear of disappointing her father. But Robert, undeterred by her father's resistance, continued his pursuit. He was no longer merely seeking Elizabeth's affection. He was now seeking her freedom. In one of his letters, he wrote, "I cannot, will not, accept a love confined by walls. You are a woman of great worth, Elizabeth. Your heart, your mind, and your spirit are not meant to be shackled. You deserve to be with me, as I with you, and I shall not rest until we are together, no matter the cost." His words were not just romantic. They were an appeal to her independence, to the woman within her who longed for more than what the world and her father had planned for her. Robert's conviction was a breath of fresh air in the stifling air of Elizabeth's life, and for the first time in many years, Elizabeth began to believe that perhaps there was a way to escape. But as she considered the possibility of leaving, the fear of her father's wrath weighed heavily on her. Her father, upon discovering the depth of her attachment to Robert, reacted with fury. He forbade her from seeing him, threatening to disown her if she pursued any further connection with the man who had stolen her heart. To Edward Barrett, Elizabeth was still his little girl, incapable of making her own decisions. His anger and control seemed inescapable. Elizabeth, however, had come to a breaking point. The love she had for Robert had not only changed her heart, it had awakened something within her that could no longer be suppressed. She longed to experience the life of her own choosing, to live free from her father's chains, to embrace the love that had blossomed between her and Robert. Despite the consequences, she made the boldest decision of her life. She would defy her father and marry Robert. In secret, they began to plan their future, knowing the risks of such an act. Elizabeth's health was already precarious, and her father's wrath would be fierce. But the thought of a life with Robert was more than she could bear to leave behind. In 1846, after years of letters, secret meetings, and emotional turmoil, Elizabeth made the decision that would change the course of her life forever. She eloped with Robert to Italy, far from the suffocating confines of her father's house and the suffocating control of her family. The moment was bittersweet. Though Elizabeth had found freedom and love, she had also severed the ties to the family that had once been her everything. Her father, heartbroken and enraged, disowned her, never speaking to her again. Elizabeth's decision to leave was not without a heavy cost, but as she boarded the ship to Italy, she was finally free, not just from her father, but from the life she had been forced to live for so long. Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning's marriage was a leap of faith, a bold, decisive act of love that came at a high personal cost. Yet, once they were together, their life in Italy began as a quiet, deeply personal revolution. For Elizabeth, the physical and emotional toll of her previous years of confinement had not disappeared overnight. Her health remained fragile, and the years of isolation had left her with an anxiety she could not shake. But with Robert by her side, she found a new sense of purpose and fulfillment that had been absent from her life for so long. The couple moved to Florence, where they settled into a modest home and began building a life together, far from the prying eyes of England. Robert, deeply committed to Elizabeth, was not only her lover, but her companion and protector. Their marriage, which had been forged under the strain of family opposition and personal sacrifice, now took root in the soil of mutual respect, shared intellectual pursuits, and an unwavering bond. Robert's love for Elizabeth was not simply based on admiration for her beauty or her poetry. It was built on the foundation of shared values, shared passions, and a profound emotional connection. Though the years that followed were marked by the peace of domestic life, their marriage was not without its challenges. Elizabeth's health remained frail, and she frequently battled with the symptoms of her chronic illness, including a debilitating spinal condition that left her in near constant pain. Yet, in these moments of suffering, Robert's devotion only deepened. He cared for her with an attentiveness that went beyond duty, nurturing her with the same tenderness that had first drawn them together. In his letters and conversations, he always referred to her as his darling, a term that encapsulated both his adoration and his deep commitment to her well-being. It was in Florence that Elizabeth wrote her most famous work, Sonnets from the Portuguese. The sonnets were a poetic chronicle of her love for Robert, a love that had defied familial, societal, and even physical obstacles. The collection of poems was not merely an expression of romantic love, but a deep exploration of the emotional and spiritual depths of their connection. In them, Elizabeth gave voice to her most intimate emotions, revealing her joy, her vulnerability, and her yearning to be loved fully. The sonnets were a gift to Robert, a poetic testament to the depth of her feelings for him, and an enduring reflection of their relationship. One of the most poignant sonnets, Sonnet 43, famously begins with the line, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." This line encapsulates the core of Elizabeth's love for Robert, a love that was boundless, transcendent, and unmeasurable. The sonnets became a symbol of their love, intimate, private, yet universal, in their ability to speak to the heart of what it means to love someone deeply. In turn, Robert's admiration for Elizabeth grew even stronger, not just as his wife, but as an artist in her own right. He recognized the beauty and depth of her poetry, and he always celebrated her brilliance. He often wrote of his admiration for her intellect and how, despite her fragile body, her mind was a force of nature that could not be contained. Robert was fully aware that he had been blessed to marry a woman whose poetry would transcend time, whose words would resonate with generations to come. However, as the years passed, Elizabeth's health continued to decline. She had always been delicate, but now the toll of living with a chronic condition, combined with the stresses of life, weighed heavily on her body. Yet, even in her physical decline, she remained committed to her poetry and her marriage. The couple's love for each other remained the cornerstone of their lives, and even in the darkest moments of Elizabeth's illness, Robert remained her unwavering support. In 1861, after years of battling her physical ailments, Elizabeth's health finally took its toll. She passed away in her husband's arms at the age of 55. Robert, devastated by the loss of his beloved wife, was inconsolable. Elizabeth had been not only his partner in life, but his muse, his confidant, and the love of his life. Her death left a void that no one else could fill. Robert Browning, once a brilliant poet in his own right, was now a man broken by grief. Yet, even in the depths of his sorrow, Robert was determined to preserve Elizabeth's legacy. After her death, he took great care to ensure that her poetry remained in the public eye. He published her collected works and ensured that her sonnets from the Portuguese would be remembered as one of the most powerful and beautiful expressions of romantic love ever written. His devotion to her was evident in every action he took, every word he wrote. He became a caretaker of her memory, and through his efforts, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's place in literary history was firmly established. Their love story became one of the most enduring in the world of literature, a tale of two poets who found in each other not just passion, but intellectual and emotional companionship. It was a love story that transcended time and space, one that lived on in the pages of their poetry and in the hearts of all those who read their words. Through their poetry, Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning remain as icons of love and artistry, a testament to the power of love to transcend all boundaries. Though their marriage was cut short by Elizabeth's untimely death, the love between Elizabeth and Robert Browning continues to resonate through the centuries. Their love was a love of the mind, a love that transcended the physical realm and existed in the realm of intellect, poetry, and shared ideals. Their correspondence, their sonnets, and the story of their devotion to each other remain a testament to the enduring power of love, how it can both transcend and define a life. Their love story teaches us that true love is not merely about physical beauty or fleeting moments of passion. It is about connection, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. It is about finding someone who not only understands your deepest thoughts, but who encourages you to grow and to become the best version of yourself. Their love was not without hardship, but it was one that ultimately shaped both of their lives and legacies. The sonnets Elizabeth wrote for Robert are more than just beautiful verses. They are a reminder that love, when truly felt and expressed, can become immortal. The love between Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning was a rare and precious thing one that forever changed the course of their lives and left an indelible mark on the world of poetry and literature. In the end, their love was not just a romantic relationship. It was a partnership of souls, bound together by their shared passion for art, poetry, and intellectual pursuit. And through their poetry, their love lives on, inspiring readers and lovers of literature for generations to come. In the 17th century, the Mughal Empire was at the height of its power, spreading across much of the Indian subcontinent. Under the rule of Emperor Shah Jahan, the empire enjoyed unprecedented wealth, artistic flourishing, and architectural wonders. Shah Jahan, a ruler known for his charisma, military conquests, and ambitious building projects, seemed invincible. Yet beneath his imposing exterior was a heart deeply in love. Mumtaz Mahal, the woman who would become the object of his undying devotion, was a princess of extraordinary beauty and grace. Born Arjumand Banu Begum in 1593, she was the daughter of a noble family, well-educated and renowned for her intelligence, charm, and kindness. In a world dominated by politics and power, Mumtaz Mahal was not merely a beautiful woman. She was a woman of substance, revered by those who knew her for her wisdom and compassion. Shah Jahan's love for Mumtaz Mahal began long before they were married. The two first met when Mumtaz was just a teenager, and Shah Jahan, then Prince Khurram, was immediately captivated by her beauty and intellect. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and they were married in 1612 when Mumtaz was only 19 years old. Unlike many royal marriages of the time, which were often arranged for political reasons, their marriage was one of love and mutual respect. Mumtaz Mahal became Shah Jahan's favorite wife and the love of his life. She was not just his queen, she was his confidant, his partner in all matters of state, and the one person with whom he shared his dreams, ambitions, and inner thoughts. The couple had many children together, but they were not simply rulers. They were true companions in every sense of the word. Shah Jahan often referred to her as Mumtaz Mahal, meaning exalted one of the palace, a title that reflected the high regard in which he held her. Their love was marked by a rare depth of affection in a world of political alliances and power struggles. While Shah Jahan's court was filled with intrigues and challenges, Mumtaz Mahal remained his constant support, helping him navigate the complex world of Mughal politics. Her presence in his life was a stabilizing force, and their bond was one of deep emotional and intellectual connection. Shah Jahan was not just a ruler who commanded armies. He was a man whose heart was entirely devoted to his wife. Yet, their love story would soon face a heartbreaking challenge. The love between Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal is portrayed as one of deep affection and mutual respect. They were more than just a royal couple. They were true partners. However, the couple's happiness was about to be shattered by an event that would change the course of their lives forever. What is the cost of their love, and how will they face the inevitable challenges that await them? As the years passed, Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal's love continued to flourish. The Mughal Empire reached unprecedented heights under Shah Jahan's rule, and Mumtaz Mahal stood by his side both as his partner in governance and as the mother of his children. Their life together, though filled with the demands of royal duties, seemed perfect, an enduring love that appeared impervious to the pressures of their world. However, in 1631, fate took a cruel turn. Mumtaz Mahal, who had borne many children for Shah Jahan, was pregnant once again. And it was this pregnancy that would become the cruelest test of their love. The royal couple had traveled to the province of Burhanpur in central India for a military campaign. And it was there, in a time of political unrest and amidst the grueling demands of royal life, that Mumtaz Mahal's health began to decline. In the throes of childbirth, Mumtaz Mahal's condition grew worse. After enduring hours of pain, she gave birth to a daughter, but the strain of labor, combined with the years of bearing children, took its toll on her already fragile body. On June 17, 1631, Mumtaz Mahal passed away, leaving Shah Jahan devastated and heartbroken. His beloved wife, the woman who had been the cornerstone of his life and reign, was gone. The death of Mumtaz Mahal shattered Shah Jahan's world. His heart, once filled with the joy of their shared life, was now consumed by grief and an overwhelming sense of loss. The empire, though vast and prosperous, seemed meaningless without her by his side. Shah Jahan, once a ruler in full command of his empire, was now a man lost in the depths of sorrow. In the days following her death, Shah Jahan entered a period of mourning that seemed to stretch on endlessly. He withdrew from public life, refusing to attend court meetings or engage in affairs of state. The once vibrant and powerful emperor became a shadow of his former self, consumed by grief. His heart had been torn in two by the loss of the woman he had loved with every fiber of his being. But even in the depths of his sorrow, Shah Jahan knew that he could not let his love for Mumtaz Mahal die with her. He sought a way to immortalize her memory, to ensure that the world would always remember the depth of his affection for her and the extraordinary bond they had shared. And so, he embarked on a project that would forever link his name with hers: the construction of the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal, the grandest and most beautiful monument in the world, was not just a tomb for Mumtaz Mahal. It was a symbol of Shah Jahan's love, a testament to the devotion and heartache he had endured. The construction of the Taj Mahal began in 1632, just 1 year after her death. Shah Jahan spared no expense, gathering the finest architects, artisans, and workers from across the empire to create what would become the world's most famous symbol of eternal love. The building process was long and arduous, taking over 20 years to complete. The Taj Mahal was built using the finest white marble, intricately carved with designs that included floral motifs, inscriptions from the Quran, and precious stones. The monument's central dome, rising majestically over the reflecting pool, symbolized the grandeur of Shah Jahan's love for Mumtaz Mahal. The entire complex was designed to evoke the sense of paradise, a physical representation of the heaven he believed she had gone to after her death. Shah Jahan's grief was tangible in every inch of the Taj Mahal's design. It was as though he had poured every ounce of his love and sorrow into the marble, creating a monument that would outlive both of them. The Taj Mahal became a sacred place, a final resting place for Mumtaz Mahal, and an enduring symbol of Shah Jahan's undying devotion. It was a masterpiece, but it was also a memorial to the love that had defined his life. Yet, the construction of the Taj Mahal was not without its own set of personal sacrifices. Shah Jahan's obsession with the monument led to the depletion of the empire's resources, and while the grandeur of the Taj Mahal was admired by many, there were those within the empire who questioned the extravagant costs. His obsession with the Taj Mahal and his withdrawal from the affairs of state began to affect his rule, and tensions arose within his court. But for Shah Jahan, none of it mattered. The Taj Mahal was his tribute to Mumtaz Mahal, and it was all that remained of the love that had once filled his life with joy. He believed that through this monumental creation, their love would live on forever. The construction of the Taj Mahal was the final act of devotion that Shah Jahan could offer to the woman who had been his heart and soul. Shah Jahan's grief has propelled him into an obsession with building a monument that would immortalize his love for Mumtaz Mahal. The Taj Mahal rises as a symbol of their undying love, but the emotional and political cost of his devotion is evident. Shah Jahan has sacrificed much in the pursuit of this grand vision, and yet, as the Taj Mahal nears completion, a new challenge awaits. Will the love that inspired such an extraordinary monument endure? Or will the weight of Shah Jahan's obsession overshadow the memory of his beloved? The Taj Mahal, once completed, stood as a glorious symbol of Shah Jahan's love and devotion. The monument became a beacon of eternal love, and its beauty transcended the confines of time and place. Yet, in the midst of its grandeur, Shah Jahan's personal suffering and the consequences of his obsession began to take a more pronounced toll on him and the empire he had once ruled with strength and vision. The Taj Mahal, completed in 1653, was a breathtaking testament to the depth of Shah Jahan's grief and love for Mumtaz Mahal. The intricate designs, the stunning white marble, the reflecting pools, and the gardens all served as a tribute to the woman who had captivated his heart for life. But while the world marveled at its beauty, the emperor's life had been irrevocably changed. His health deteriorated, his political power weakened, and his relationship with his sons became increasingly strained. Shah Jahan's obsession with the Taj Mahal had come at a high cost, and those around him began to take notice. The Mughal court, once a place of power and influence, now felt the effects of Shah Jahan's withdrawal from leadership. His inability to focus on the empire's growing concerns led to discontent among his nobles and a series of political struggles within the royal family. Shah Jahan's sons, particularly Dara Shikoh, Aurangzeb, and Shuja, saw their father's distracted state as an opportunity to vie for power. The tension between Shah Jahan and his sons reached a boiling point, and it was the ambitious Aurangzeb who ultimately saw his moment to strike. In 1658, Aurangzeb, with the support of his allies, led a rebellion against his father, imprisoning Shah Jahan in the Agra fort. For the rest of his life, Shah Jahan was confined to a small room in the fort, gazing out at the Taj Mahal in the distance, just a few miles away from where he had once been free, where he had once shared his life with Mumtaz Mahal. The prison where Shah Jahan was held became a symbol of both his physical captivity and the emotional prison that grief had created for him. The irony of Shah Jahan's fate was cruel. He had built the Taj Mahal to honor Mumtaz Mahal's memory, but in the end, the very monument he had created for her became a reminder of his own emotional captivity. It was as though his love for her had imprisoned him, leaving him to mourn forever the woman he had once loved with such intensity and devotion. His reign as emperor had been marked by a series of triumphs, but the final years of his life were defined by the pain of loss, the destruction of his once great power, and the unrelenting sorrow that never left him. Shah Jahan's life, once filled with ambition and love, was now reduced to the confines of a prison and the shadow of the Taj Mahal. His empire, which had flourished under his rule, was left to be governed by his son, Aurangzeb, a man whose political savvy and ruthlessness were in stark contrast to Shah Jahan's once glorious reign. Aurangzeb's ascent to the throne marked a shift in the Mughal Empire, one that moved away from the more open, tolerant governance of Shah Jahan to a more orthodox, authoritarian rule. The empire, which had been a beacon of artistic and cultural flourishing, now found itself caught in a period of decline. Shah Jahan's final years were marked by both physical and emotional isolation. He spent his days gazing at the Taj Mahal from his prison window, the image of his lost love forever etched in his mind. Despite being physically confined, his mind often wandered back to the days when he and Mumtaz Mahal had shared a love that had transcended the ordinary. It was in those quiet moments of reflection that he found his only solace, knowing that the Taj Mahal would stand as a testament to their love for centuries to come. When Shah Jahan passed away in 1666, he was laid to rest beside Mumtaz Mahal in the Taj Mahal, a final act of devotion, a final return to the woman who had been his heart. The emperor's grave, positioned beside her, was simple, understated, and in stark contrast to the grandeur of the monument that had been built in her honor. In the end, Shah Jahan's life and his love for Mumtaz Mahal had come full circle. The man who had built the most magnificent symbol of love the world had ever seen now rested beside the woman who had made him the happiest, and later, the most sorrowful man in the world. Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal's love story, though tragically marked by loss and obsession, remains one of the most enduring and beautiful narratives in the history of the Mughal Empire. Their love, which had started as a passionate bond between two individuals, transcended time and space through the creation of the Taj Mahal. The monument is not just a tomb, but a symbol of the power of love to endure even in the face of death. It stands as a timeless reminder of the connection between two souls who, despite the passage of time, continue to inspire generations. The Taj Mahal itself became one of the most iconic symbols of love in the world. People from all over the globe travel to India to witness its grandeur, and it remains a UNESCO World Heritage Site. As much as the Taj Mahal is admired for its architectural beauty, it is its emotional significance that captures the hearts of those who visit. It is a monument built from the deepest of emotions, and its story will forever be intertwined with the tragic love of Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal. Their love, though interrupted by loss and hardship, is eternal in the hearts of all who behold the Taj Mahal. In its reflection on the water, in its intricate carvings, in its towering dome, we see not just the glory of an empire, but the undying devotion of a husband to his wife. Shah Jahan's final act of devotion was to ensure that Mumtaz Mahal's memory would live forever, not just as the woman who had been the queen of his heart, but as a symbol of the love that transcended even the greatest of human challenges. In the end, Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal's love teaches us that even in the face of the greatest losses, love can endure. It can inspire, transform, and leave a legacy that lasts for eternity. Their love changed history, but was it worth the cost? In our last story, Shah Jahan built the Taj Mahal out of grief, Which love story touched your heart more? Cleopatra and Caesar, or Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal? Tell us in the comments.